Welcome to today's explainer. If you're running a saltwater tank, you know the hobby is absolutely booming right now. But along with that growth, there's a massive and honestly fascinating conversation heating up in the Illinois reef keeping community. It has huge implications for anyone who loves keeping these incredible marine ecosystems in their living rooms.
It really boils down to one simple question, one that's kind of dividing hobbyists, local fish store owners, and conservationists alike. Should we be prioritizing locally grown corals or sticking with imported specimens from overseas supply chains? It sounds like a basic shopping preference, right? But man, it is so much deeper than that.
To unpack the whole thing, we're going to look at the core of this debate, build the case for local corals, map out the wild logistics of imports, touch on the ethical side of things, and finally, give you some actionable steps for your next purchase. Let's get right into it.
So let's start with the big picture. What exactly is the Illinois reef debate?
Well, it turns out this shift is about way more than just aesthetics. We aren't just talking about grabbing the most radioactive-looking neon green polyp for your aquascape. People advocating for local corals are arguing that keeping things regional drastically improves animal welfare, heavily reduces shipping stress, and literally builds a much more accountable supply chain right in our own backyard.
Which brings us to the actual benefits of keeping it local.
When a coral is grown right in a regional system, the most obvious win is that it spends way less time in a shipping box. But the absolute game changer here is consistency. Think about it. From the grow-out tank at a local farm all the way to the display at your neighborhood shop, that coral is chilling in virtually the exact same water parameters. Because it doesn't have to endure crazy environmental swings, hobbyists are seeing vastly higher survival rates once those frags make it into their home tanks.
And if you've ever kept a reef tank, you know the sheer heartbreak of a mystery loss. You know when a gorgeous, expensive coral just melts away a week later, and your water test's perfectly fine. That stability we just talked about means fewer of those frustrating losses. By skipping the intense global transit, the coral dodges that deep internal stress that so often proves fatal weeks down the line.
Plus, the parks aren't just biological. There's a huge educational advantage too. When you buy locally, the folks at the shop are usually in direct communication with the growers, so you aren't just guessing on care requirements. You're getting totally tailored advice on exact lighting intensity, flow, and feeding habits that match exactly what that specific coral is already used to.
So, as a buyer, you're really trying to balance two very different realities. Local corals bring incredible survivability, super low stress, and dialed-in care instructions. But on the flip side, imported corals bring this mind-blowing, almost limitless variety to the table. They give us access to those ultra-rare color morphs and specific species that just haven't been successfully farmed around here yet.
And that leads us perfectly into the other half of the conversation, the journey of imported corals.
Look, make no mistake, imports are still massively popular for a reason. They are the backbone of those high-end, exotic aesthetics that so many hobbyists are chasing. Plus, big importers have these deeply rooted overseas relationships, which is honestly crucial for keeping the supply chain stable when the hobby hits peak demand.
But man, the logistical hurdles are wild. Imagine the journey of a single imported coral. It has to be collected from a wild reef or an overseas farm, pushed through a complex export facility, bagged up for global transport across literal oceans, and then finally unpacked into a retail system here in the US. It's a massive undertaking. And during that epic, multi-step journey, these super sensitive animals are facing some serious risks. Just think about it. They're dealing with severe temperature swings while sitting on airport tarmacs, potential flight delays, and totally drastic changes in water chemistry as they bounce from the ocean to a plastic bag, to an exporter's vat, and finally to a retail store.
Which creates a really tough situation for us at home. Even if an imported coral looks flawless and perfectly puffed up at the local fish store, it could be harboring delayed stress from that massive trip. It's kind of like a ticking time bomb. That stress can suddenly hit once it's in your aquarium, making acclimation an absolute nightmare, especially if you're still tweaking the flow, temperature, and nutrient levels in your own setup.
Zooming out a bit, how does this all tie into the broader picture of ecosystem impact and ethics?
Well, reef keepers today are demanding way more accountability. And when you look at the breakdown, there's a stark contrast. Because local growers are right in our backyard. Tracing the origin of a coral is incredibly easy. The propagation methods are highly controlled and transparent. That gives retailers, and honestly you as the buyer, a huge boost in confidence. Whereas with imported sources, tracing a single frag back through a giant international chain is notoriously difficult and varies wildly depending on who you're buying from.
Ultimately, though, the end goal for everyone in this debate is exactly the same: responsible sourcing.
Whether a coral is local or imported, the modern hobby demands clear documentation and strict adherence to best practices. We all want to minimize harm to wild reef populations and ensure we're acting as ethical stewards of the oceans.
Okay, so what does all this mean for you, the aquarist? Regardless of whether you decide your tank needs a locally grown frag or a rare imported colony, advocates in the community agree that your personal purchasing habits are the ultimate key here. Be meticulous about checking your retailer's policies. Don't be shy about asking questions either. Always request the grow-out history or origin details if they have them, and, perhaps most importantly, follow super robust acclimation procedures when you get home to minimize stress and give that coral the best chance possible. For the Illinois reef community, this whole movement is a really exciting opportunity to build local capacity. You can totally do your part by supporting regional growers, sharing your care successes and failures so the community learns together, and openly encouraging your local stores to stock responsibly handled, traceable specimens.
I'll leave you with this one thought to chew on before you plan your next tank edition. In a niche hobby where stability is quite literally everything, where a single degree of temperature or a tiny swing in alkalinity can make or break a reef, where will your next piece come from? A farm just down the highway or a reef across the globe? Because remember, every single purchase you make directly shapes the future of this incredible trade. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and happy reefing.